hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race. Black
Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1, FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you. Let's talk about the Starbucks situation, because I think they just abused the black community, so-called black community. As you may know, may remember, I think it was back in April or something like that, we had an incident in Philadelphia that led to a lot of upheaval and an interesting decision on the part of Starbucks.
It's the viral video Starbucks hopes will not define the coffee giant. Today, the company announced that all of its 8,000 U.S. stores will close the afternoon of May 29th. Employees will go through racial bias training.
Think of it as a teachable moment, an opportunity to take something and learn from it and fix it.
According to Philadelphia police, the two men who were waiting for a friend wanted to use the Starbucks bathroom without buying anything, against store policy. The manager called 911.
I have two gentlemen on my cafe that are refusing to make a purchase or leave.
The police called for backup.
They're requesting another unit along with a supervisor.
The police chief says the arrests were justified.
What do we want? Justice!
But the incident triggered protests and a nationwide boycott campaign. In California, a black man said he shot this video at an LA Starbucks in January.
Is it my skin color? Is it my skin color?
Accusing Starbucks of letting a white customer use the bathroom without buying anything, but not letting him do the same thing. Starbucks has not commented on the incident, while its CEO personally flew to Philadelphia and apologized to the two men.
Do you think Starbucks is doing enough? Yes, I do. They acted very quickly. I think it's a huge opportunity for them to work with their employees to redefine the customer experience.
An afternoon without coffee, Starbucks hopes will restore any faith it has lost. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking.
Let's recap. There was a legitimate trespassing call here. You came into a store, you did not seek to purchase anything in the store, and you were asked to leave. On private property, they're allowed to do that. If you don't act the way they want you to behave, they're allowed to ask you to leave. And if you do not leave, it is trespassing. They did not. The cops were called. The cops did not come looking for them. They were called there, and they were arrested for trespassing. And now, of course, this is a terrible incident. And I'm wondering why this incident was any better or worse than the incident in Los Angeles, actually Torrance, California, where you heard the gentleman actually sounding like a teenage schoolgirl. Is it my color? Is it my color? Is it my skin color? Is my skin? I mean, that kind of thing is kind of silly. I'd want you out of the store too. I think the reason it was treated differently is because the cops weren't involved, because that store had its own security, and that gentleman, who happened to be white, got Mr. Is It My Skin Color out of the store. Well, you've had the training now, and that is an interesting thing. They shut down their stores on the 29th. You know, before we get to the training, let's remember something. The two gentlemen who were at the center of this, who were arrested in Philadelphia, whose names I don't recall, and I didn't bother to research again for this story because they don't matter anymore. They just don't matter. They were props. They were cannon fodder. They were the match that was used to light a fire, and nobody cares about the match after the fire is lit. They don't matter. They got an undisclosed amount of money. They got chump change, and they were moved along. Also, the city was given its hush money, a massive amount of $200,000 that was supposed to go to black entrepreneur training. I can almost guarantee you that is going to get either lost in the city's bureaucracy or wind up in somebody's campaign fund. That's all there is to it. In other words, they've done nothing financially, either for the people who were directly involved, the two gentlemen who were directly involved, or the black entrepreneurs that were supposedly going to get a benefit. In other words, the black men who were involved, they've already been screwed. And the black entrepreneurs who are supposed to get this $200,000 in programs, they're being screwed. But now we've had the training. And an interesting thing is after the training, not surprisingly, people wanted to talk about it. Here's what happened when folks tried to have a discussion about what went on during the training.
When a white Starbucks manager in Philadelphia called the cops on two black men for sitting in the store without buying anything, Starbucks found itself facing a massive PR crisis. The company responded by announcing that today, all 8,000 of its company-owned locations would close early for staff to attend racial bias training. Starbucks invited Vice News to a media event to hear a sanitized readout from employees who participated.
Most Americans don't like talking about race, and they definitely don't like talking about their own racism. So it's sort of hard to imagine the guy who makes your venti non-fat caramel macchiato suddenly becoming more woke just because he sat through a 4-hour seminar.
Dear Starbucks partners, I'm Stanley Nelson, a documentary filmmaker. My films are about race, America, and the decades-long struggle for all people to be treated as equals in public spaces.
This training might make people less likely to call the cops on you, but it's sort of hard to know how your average Starbucks employee feels about the whole thing, because Starbucks won't let us talk to any baristas or anybody who'd actually interact with in a Starbucks. Instead, they invited a bunch of media outlets to interview a handpicked group of district managers who all seemed really excited about the whole training thing.
It was a really great experience. It was a really great interaction that I got to have with some of my peers.
Were there any moments in there that felt uncomfortable at all?
I don't know that uncomfortable is the right word to describe. There were times that I watched some things and it made me go, wow, I don't experience life like that.
Well, I have to make sure that my hands are visible when I walk into certain places so they make sure I'm not stealing, just leaving the house some days. You know, sometimes it just keep you at home and just keep you away from everything.
That was a little bit like that. I punched in the gut a little bit.
But for a lot of people, say black people, this isn't so much a punch in the gut as it is just a reminder of what you go through every single day. And that doesn't seem like a whole lot of fun to sit through. And that's the thing. Starbucks says they want to confront all forms of bias. But most of their training material is laser focused on anti-black racism, which isn't bad in and of itself. But it's not just black people who deal with bias in America. Islamophobia is still happening. Homophobia has not gone away. People are getting yelled at for speaking Spanish in public. Starbucks says this is just the first session in a larger training plan. But for right now, it feels like a narrow response to what happened to black people in Philadelphia. And even that might not make much of a difference.
Do you think you can train racism out of people?
I do not feel I can answer that question. I'm not sure because I don't think that's something that you can train and you cannot train it.
I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I guess if it's something that is trained into people, why wouldn't you be able to train it out of people?
No, I don't, and I don't think that's what the attempt of today was either.
Now, I went and got that clip from Vice News, who put their story out on the 30th, the day after the Starbucks training. The interesting thing about that is, for one, notice how Vice didn't get to talk to anybody except those who the store put forward. And it's interesting how the people who were managers, they're all managers, that were allowed to talk to Vice News couldn't answer Vice News one question. Well, can you train racism out of people? I mean, you went ahead and did this training. Is it going to work? Well, I can't answer that question. If you can't answer that question after you went through the training, then why did you have the training? Anyway, another thing that comes up is, though Vice didn't have the journalistic wherewithal to get to people who had gone through the training, the Daily Mail out of the UK did. They did. They ran a story on the 1st of June. Starbucks employees were shown video after video of black people being abused during racial sensitivity training, staff claim. 2 Starbucks baristas spoke to Philly magazine after going through the company's bias training on that day, 29th. The employees said they thought the training videos were too graphic, showing black people being beaten by white people, as though that's what happened in Philadelphia in the Starbucks. It did not. One of the baristas said a woman in his class had to leave because the videos were making her uncomfortable. Told them I didn't like the video, and they told me they understood and that I was open to give my opinion. Here is the interesting, I guess you could say, money quote from one of the people who went through the training. It felt like we were off task the entire time because we didn't reflect on the situation itself. The young person's name was Tina. The training materials focused a lot on police brutality, which had nothing to do with the incident that happened. Tina said they were showed videos that depicted black people being beaten by white cops that were really disturbing. I told them I didn't like the video. They told me they understood. Another one, Jamie, said one girl in this session had to leave the room. At one point, a girl at my table actually had to get up and leave because video after video, they showed black people being assaulted by police or black people being verbally assaulted and white people being racially biased toward people of color. It offended her. She left after that. Here is where we are right now. So what you had was 2 black guys trespassing at a store. The cops were called, and when the guys refused to leave, they were arrested. They had the option of leaving. In response to that, we had this great progressive uprising. Oh, this is so terrible. And one of the great progressive captains of industry, if you want to call it that, Starbucks, decides we're going to train everybody about how to make sure this doesn't happen again. And what do? They show video after video of something that had nothing to do with what occurred in the store. And this is just the beginning, because there's a lot of other stuff they didn't show. As Vice pointed out, there's a lot of other quote-unquote bias that they didn't show. This was indoctrination. And if you think it's going to stop with Starbucks, you're wrong. If you think it's going to stop with black on white on black racism, if that's what you want to call it, then you're wrong. This is basically trying to get everyone to buy into the progressive idea of how they're supposed to think and behave. And they go hard in the paint. And they're not going to spare you. And black people had just gone through this whole thing where you had video after video showing them as weak, pathetic creatures who need to be pitied because they get treated so bad, which is not even the case in this country anymore. They just treated black people, Starbucks did, like the only goat at an ISIS training camp. You guys have been royally abused by somebody who you thought cared about you. And the majority of blacks are clueless about what happened and what it actually is going to mean. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the Make America Great train is now striking very deep into the fabric of progressivism. It is starting to let people go. And by that I'm talking about pardons. Here is one that is extremely significant.
All right, we have some breaking news from the president. He's actually just announced on Twitter that he has plans to grant a full pardon to conservative commentator and author Dinesh D'Souza. D'Souza pleaded guilty in 2014 to campaign finance violations arising from contributions to a GOP Senate candidate. And the president says that D'Souza, quote, was treated very unfairly by our government. Let's bring in Mark Preston now to join us to talk about this. This was somewhat unexpected, right, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, and no doubt, we certainly did not see this coming in. In many ways, though, we should be surprised because what we've seen is President Trump with other pardons of famous people. Joe Arpaio, for example, we saw him pardon him recently. And in addition to that, we saw Scooter Libby as well, who was pardoned. Now, Scooter Libby, of course, was former chief of staff to Vice President Dick Cheney and was involved in releasing the name of a CIA agent. But having said that, President Trump clearly doing something that is unexpected. But Brianna, should we ever be not expect him to do something that would surprise us?
Dinesh D'Souza was destroying the progressive movement with movies. Obama's America. Imagine the world without America. Imagine America. Imagine the world without her. That came out in 2014, where Obama's America came out in 2012, I believe. This, along with his books and along with his speaking engagements, was ripping gaping holes in the progressive arguments and doing so in a media that, I'm sorry, they believe they controlled. He was making movies, and these movies were well accepted. And they found a way to shut him up by trumping up some bogus campaign finance violation, and therefore they had muted him. And now Donald Trump has said, no, this is a problem. And CNN, of course, is bent out of shape about this because they actually understand what it means. Also, you heard about Joseph Arpaio, and Mike Pence actually went and praised Arpaio, who is now, I believe, running for the Senate.
In Arizona, Vice President Pence pays tribute to a popular former sheriff, now a Senate candidate, a man Pence called a great friend of the president.
Tireless champion of strong borders and the rule of law, spent a lifetime in law enforcement. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, I'm honored to have you here.
But that champion of the rule of law, former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, was convicted for contempt of court for ignoring a judge's order to stop detaining people he suspected of being undocumented immigrants.
Vice President Pence heaped praise on the sheriff as if he had not broken a federal law.
President Trump pardoned Arpaio last year, before Arpaio was sentenced. And tonight, a key question is being raised. Could Trump pardon his way out of the Mueller investigation? The New York Times recently reported that Trump's White House attorneys last year approached lawyers for former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort with the idea that Trump might pardon both of them. That was while Robert Mueller was building cases against both men. White House lawyers denied making those overtures. Manafort's since been indicted for financial crimes and pleaded not guilty. How could a Manafort pardon help Trump in the Mueller probe?
Pardoning Manafort would make sure that Manafort would not need to cooperate with Mueller to stay out of federal prison.
Flynn has pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI and cooperated with prosecutors. But experts say as he awaits sentencing, a pardon could still be in play for Flynn and could still help Trump in the Russia investigation.
They would still need Flynn's cooperation following up on any documents or any statements he's given to Mueller for a trial or for further investigation.
Trump's lawyers consistently deny discussing pardons for anyone involved in the Russia investigation. But some legal experts say Trump could pardon Flynn and Manafort if he wanted to stymie the Mueller probe.
The president has the ability to take whatever action he deems fit, pretty much for the reasons he sees fit, and he doesn't honestly have to really explain them even. He can simply just decide to issue a pardon, and he can issue it at any point in the process.
But other analysts say there's one part of the Constitution that would prevent Trump from pardoning Flynn and Manafort, the part saying Trump has to, quote, faithfully execute the office of president.
Those are duties against self-protection and self-dealing. If the president uses a pardon to get co-conspirators off the hook and so that they don't have to participate in a prosecution, that too would be a faithless use of the pardon power for self-dealing or self-protection against the public interest.
Hogwash. How come the pardon of Mark Rich by Bill Clinton wasn't deemed to be, oh, that's right, he was out of office because he did that going out the door, therefore you can't touch him? Yeah, I remember that. This is interesting. Donald Trump is brave enough to do his pardons while he is still on the clock. If people don't like what he's doing, they have a chance to vote against him. He's not a coward like Barack Obama. He's not a coward like George W. Bush, who did not pardon Scooter Libby as he should have. He's not a coward like Donald Trump's a lot of things. He's just not a coward. You may remember the Reagan administration where you had Ray Donovan, who was labor secretary, who was brought up on charges and eventually exonerated, but his reputation had been had been tarnished. This is the mode of operation of the progressive movement, to tarnish people, to use the legal system to bring them down when they do not have the mental or intellectual or ideological capital to oppose them. They did the same thing to Tom DeLay in Texas. Donald Trump, by pardoning people, has put them on notice, and it's scaring them to death that they no longer have that weapon. They're going to have to oppose these people in the marketplace of ideas, and progressives are bankrupt in that area. And he's not stopping there, by the way. Donald Trump is just on his merry way thinking about other pardons.
This is certainly a surprising development. Let me explain how it happened. The president did just land here a few moments ago. He is greeting a few military officials here at Ellington Field, just outside of Houston. But we are told by pool reporters, including our Kevin Lippak, on the plane that the president invited reporters up to his office on Air Force One, which is a makeshift Oval Office, if you will, and he talked to these reporters for about 30 minutes or so. Most of that conversation was indeed off the record, but the part that he wanted to put on the record, we are told, is this specific new information about how he is thinking about pardoning former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, as you said, as well as Martha Stewart. Now, this is certainly coming as the president is giving a lot of attention to pardons. He has been doing it with more frequency, of course. Had an earlier tweet this morning about Dinesh D'Souza, but it is the Rod Blagojevich potential pardon that is certainly interesting, John. And you can see the president is now waving to a small crowd of supporters here behind me. He's pumping his fist into the air there as he gets into his limousine there. But certainly these pardons are something that are quite unusual. Rod Blagojevich, of course, a Democrat. He is one of a long line of Illinois governors who have been sentenced on corruption charges of a variety of matters. He just recently had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal talking about sentencing reform. But one other similarity Rod Blagojevich has to Martha Stewart, they were both on The Apprentice. John, they were both on the president's show, of course, before he came into the White House, so he knows them, he's familiar with them. He said perhaps not a full pardon for Rod Blagojevich, but he might try and shorten his sentence. He has an 18-year sentence there. And he said this as well. He said an 18-year sentence is unfair. He said plenty of politicians have said worse things.
So Trump is looking to pardon people that don't even always agree with him. Rod Blagojevich is of an opposite party, different state. No allegiance to Trump whatsoever. Trump just thinks the way he was treated was badly. He thinks how he was sentenced was excessive. Martha Stewart has had a public feud with Donald Trump that recently ended, so you can't say that she's a big Trump supporter all the time. And while you're looking at all the things and everybody's trying to figure out all the political angles that Donald Trump is trying to play by pardoning, please explain to me why they're leaving this out.
Calling it a move that corrected a wrong in American history, President Trump pardoned former heavyweight champion Jack Johnson. Johnson, who was the first African-American heavyweight champ, was convicted in 1913 for taking a woman across state lines for immoral purposes. Well, the woman, Lucille Cameron, who later became his wife, was white, and the two were arrested for violating the Mann Act. President Trump said he was alerted to Johnson's story by actor Sylvester Stallone, and in announcing the pardon posthumously on Thursday said, "We have done something today that was very important because we righted a wrong. Jack Johnson was not treated fairly, and we have corrected that, and I'm very honored to have done it."
Barack Obama, who claims to be black, had 8 years to pardon Jack Johnson. He knew about Jack Johnson. He had all the black boxers in his ear. He had everybody there to tell him, you know what, and to strike a blow against racism, because that's all it was that got Jack Johnson convicted. Had he taken a black woman across state lines, it wouldn't have mattered. The Mann Act, which is still on the books as far as I know, would not have been invoked. So this could have been a striking a blow at racism and the first black president standing up for the legacy of black people, and for 8 years he didn't do a doggone thing. Donald Trump didn't even hear about this until Sylvester Stallone calls him and says, hey, what about the Sylvester Stallone's a lot of things, but he ain't black. And Donald Trump moves. Let me help you out with something. Say what you want about Donald Trump. Donald Trump never has been and likely never will be a racist. Donald Trump is simply doing what he thinks is the right thing. You may not agree with that, but he's doing things because he thinks they're the right thing to do. And that's what's scaring the heck out of progressives and liberals right now. Because if Donald Trump starts undoing their strategy of using the legal system to silence political enemies and setting those political enemies free where they need to compete with them in the marketplace of ideas, where, as I said before, progressives are intellectually and, by the way, morally bankrupt, then progressivism is going to have a whole lot harder of a time to hold sway among the American electorate. That's why CNN is very concerned about the presidential pardon. They know that he could pardon his way out of an investigation, and his pardons would stand upon legal scrutiny because they have nothing in the way of conspiracy, and neither are the men that are being charged with any conspiracy with respect to Russia or the election. Make America Great Again means putting everybody on the same ideological level footing in the American marketplace of ideas. Progressives do not like that because they don't have that much money to spend. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the storm clouds are finally gathering, slowly, for James Comey. What do you mean? Well, they're getting ready to charge, or they're considering filing charges against Andrew McCabe, who lied 4 times to federal prosecutors. 3 times he did so under oath. Fox News, which is one, along with the Washington Post, Daily Caller, was among those who reported this regarding McCabe and Comey. Comey interviewed by federal prosecutors in investigating possible McCabe charges. Former FBI Director James Comey was recently questioned by the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office as part of a probe into whether Andrew McCabe, his former deputy, committed a crime by lying to federal agents. The Washington Post, who issued this report, indicated McCabe, who was fired earlier this year by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, could be charged criminally. That would be a major problem for the FBI, because it's already out there that what McCabe did and what McCabe said and whether or not it was truthful, it's already out there that Comey knew. And the reason they're questioning Comey, bear this in mind, when the feds come to ask you questions, they don't ask you questions to which they don't have the answer already. There's not a lot of that. They don't ask you those questions. They ask those questions of other people so that when they come talk to you. All right, let me help you out. For those who don't understand how a federal investigation works, if you're the target of the investigation, you're the last person that the prosecutors are going to speak with. You're not the first one. They've already decided that you're a target, And now what they're going to do is validate whether or not you're a valid target. They're going to talk to everybody else, and you'll start noticing some of your friends and acquaintances. All of a sudden, they have legal problems. All of a sudden, they're talking to you about their lawyers and how they're having to ask their questions, and they're asking, do you know about this? Because they're asking me about you. But no one's talking to you. And then the next thing you know, your friends are being indicted. Some of your friends are going to jail. Some of your friends are cooperating with the authorities. But they're not, and they're no longer talking to you. And this goes on for a while until the knock shows up. And you know what? Notice in this case, McCabe, they're not talking to McCabe right now. They already have everything they need on McCabe. They're just trying to figure out whether or not they want to charge him. And I can guarantee the reason they want to figure out whether or not they want to charge him is because they had to determine who else they're going to be after. Because they have something to offer McCabe for testimony. They have leverage on McCabe. McCabe may be able to give them leverage on some other people, like Comey. Yeah. Now, Fox News ran an audio that went along with their published report, which brought up some things about just how much Andrew McCabe had lied. And it was horrendous. Almost unheard of how much this guy had lied. And it talked about what was going on with the Attorney General. Because you have to understand this. This whole thing with the election of 2016, the election of Donald Trump, has opened up something that has not been discussed in Washington, D.C. for 7 presidential terms, going all the way back to the last term of Ronald Reagan. Since Ronald Reagan, you have had 7 consecutive presidential terms of globalism or globalist influence. George H.W. Bush, I believe the entire Bush family are globalists. Bill Clinton is definitely a globalist. George W. Bush, too many things that he did smack of globalism, in my opinion. There's no question in anybody's mind that Barack Obama is a globalist. That's 7 terms of U.S. presidents that are setting up for globalism, which means the deep state that people talk about now has also been setting up for globalism. That's one of the reasons it's become the deep state. As deep as it is, there's always been a permanent government that was more dangerous and more powerful than elected officials. But now the last 7 presidential terms have given it a direction that is definitely anti-American. Donald Trump has started to expose all that in less than half of one presidential term. And it's making people very nervous. And when you talk about the pardons, pardons could be a big part of blowing the roof off this entire thing. Because then you find people who have been marginalized by the use of the criminal justice system against them now have their voice back. And they may have quite a bit to say. But they're talking to McCabe right now. They're talking to Comey right now because they're figuring out just how hard they want to go on McCabe. Once they get McCabe, the focus now turns up, as in up the organization ladder, up the food chain. And McCabe was number 2 at the FBI to James Comey. Comey's not stupid. He knows exactly what their questioning of him means. We're going to find out what it is that you know. Let me tell you what else their questioning of James Comey means. They have something on Comey because federal prosecutors, when they call you in for questioning, they already know the answers to the questions they want to ask you. They just want to know if you're going to tell them the truth. You might be able to inform them a little bit around the edges, but they usually have done their homework. You're not going to tell them anything that they don't already know. And one thing they do know, because James Comey keeps running his mouth, is his love affair with the prior president and his animosity or disregard for the current one. He's had this conversation with George Stephanopoulos back in April of this year.
You met with President Obama after the election.
Yeah, he held me back after one of the very last meetings I had with him after the election, and he said, but I want to just tell you something generally. I appointed you to be FBI director because of your integrity and your ability. And he looked me in the eye and he said, nothing has happened, nothing, in the last year that has changed my view of that. And look, he wasn't telling me, I agree with what you did. He wasn't telling me you made the right decision. He was telling me, I know where it came from. I know you're not a partisan hack. I know you're trying to do the right thing. And it meant a lot to me. I mean, I had not been a political supporter of President Obama's. I came to deeply respect him and his higher loyalty to the values I care a lot about. And I almost got emotional in that moment because, again, I've been walking around like Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense, and have the President of the United States say, I still respect you for the reasons I did originally, meant a lot to me.
That was a real, in some ways, a very raw conversation in your telling. What else did you tell him?
Yeah, I said to him, Mr. President, first of all, I said, thank you, Mr. President. It has been a nightmare. I've just tried to do the right thing. And he said, I know. And then I said, I think my wife would kill me if I didn't take this chance to thank you and to tell you how much I'm going to miss you. And also I told him that I dread the next 4 years, but in many ways I feel great pressure to stay, to try and protect the institution I lead.
What were you dreading?
Well, I had some sense of the nature and character of the new President of the United States, and I worried very much that there would be an effort to erode the independence of the FBI. And I worried, given what I had seen during the campaign, that effort to remain a part might be challenged in a Trump administration. And I was right, but that's what I worried about. President Obama asked, what's the plan for briefing that material? We had decided that Director Comey would meet with the President-elect privately after we briefed the President-elect and his team on the general findings so that he could review it in a more private, more sensitive setting with the President-elect.
That was James Clapper. How did President Obama respond to that?
He didn't say a word. President Obama has a great poker face, but he simply turned. So if I'm President Obama, he turned slightly to his left, looked at me, and went like this, and then looked back at Director Clapper. So it kind of gave me a Groucho Marx is how I thought about it, double eyebrow raised, didn't say a word, but communicated to me at least, and I could be misreading it because I don't know President Obama's eyebrow raises, that sort of a sympathy and concern, like good luck with that.
So much respect for Barack Obama and so much dread for Donald Trump. This is amazing. He was not responsible for keeping the organization independent. He was responsible for covering for what it had done against the American interests during 8 years of the Obama presidency. And what he dreaded is what is happening, is that all that he covered up is now coming to the forefront. It's going to be discovered, and it's going to lead to him. Now, the interesting thing is Comey knows this. He's like, well, how's he going to? I said, because there's really nowhere that James Comey can go. He's dead. Just like Andrew McCabe. He's dead. There's nowhere he can go. They did not think that the American people would ever put anyone in power that could expose what they were doing. They believed they were safe, and now they have found out that they are not. This is sweet agony for them, and a delicious turn for the American people, because they're shooting fish in a barrel. These guys can't get away. It's a matter of whether or not you want to take them down. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin' will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin' here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of this first hour. And I'm going to talk about this kind of against my better judgment, maybe, or against my natural instincts. And this is dealing with the Roseanne Barr reboot of her show from the 1990s being canceled amidst something she tweeted. And I say that because as soon as you say, well, they shouldn't have done this, you get labeled as someone who supports the individual who did the wrong. Let me say this. One, I don't think Roseanne did anything that mattered. She said a tweet. And she's done the same thing that people have done mockingly before. Is that, hey, if this one and that one had a baby, it would equal this person. There was a long-running thing where on ESPN, maybe they'd have sports centers where they'd have a picture of a smiling horse and say how much it looked like a smiling John Elway. I don't remember anybody trying to shut Sports Center down. I don't think that Roseanne Barr did anything that warranted any backlash, period. That said, I'm not a Roseanne Barr fan. I never have been a Roseanne Barr fan. To me, that's kind of something that strikes me as trailer trash humor, and I'm not interested in that. I wasn't interested 20 years ago. I'm not interested now. Nevertheless, if there are people that want to see it and there's somebody who wants to finance it, all I got to do is find something else to watch. It's not that hard. There are plenty of channels out there now. Nevertheless, we did have this big brouhaha, and it's still going on, regarding the cancellation of Roseanne Barr's remake of her show.
Tonight, a stunningly swift and dramatic end to Roseanne Barr's TV show.
Yeah, it's against the law because your generation made everything so PC.
ABC canceling the hit revival after Barr tweeted this about former President Obama's advisor Valerie Jarrett. Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby equals VJ. ABC Entertainment President Channing Dungey calling Barr's words abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values. Jarrett responding exclusively on tonight's MSNBC special, Everyday Racism.
First of all, I think we have to turn it into a teaching moment. I'm fine. I'm worried about all the people out there who don't have a circle of friends and followers who come right to their defense.
Roseanne Barr made her name being brash, funny, and coarse.
Thank you for making America great again.
Her return to network TV welcomed by 18 million viewers and President Trump.
Look at Roseanne. I called her yesterday. Look at her ratings.
On Twitter, Barr promoted conspiracy theories and attacked Democratic women, Nancy Pelosi, Chelsea Clinton, even making a similar comment about Obama's national security advisor, Susan Rice, in 2013. Still, ABC stood by Barr until now.
Networks should be more careful about who they allow to top their most prestigious shows, and there should be an understanding of where the line is and that open racism is not tolerated.
Before the cancellation, Barr apologized in 2 tweets, calling her remarks a bad joke and saying, "I should have known better." It wasn't enough. Comic Wanda Sykes, a writer and producer, quit. Sarah Gilbert, who played Barr's daughter, said the comments do not reflect the beliefs of our cast and crew.
I think this is the end of Roseanne Barr on network television.
Today, Roseanne Barr learned words do matter.
Now, Savannah, the Roseanne reboot is estimated to have brought $45 million to ABC, and next season was projected to rake in some $60 million. ABC, of course, is owned by the Walt Disney Company, and its CEO, Bob Iger, tweeted today there was only one thing to do here, and that was the right thing.
It happened fast, Anne.
It really did.
Thank you.
Let me get this straight. If the Muslim Brotherhood and the Planet of the Apes had a baby, it would equal Valerie Jarrett. If an organization and a movie franchise had a baby, it would be this person. Wow, that is the most offensive thing that I can think of that I could ever read or hear. Not. One of the things that came out in the president's brief comments that were in that clip, look at her ratings. In short, did people want to watch the show? I repeat, I don't watch Roseanne. You couldn't pay me to watch an episode of Roseanne. It's just not for me. But her ratings were significant. It was a hit TV show for whatever reason. Let the marketplace decide. Now, the reason I'm even talking about this is not even about the cancellation, because I'm trying to make it as clear as I can with respect to Roseanne Barr. I really don't care one way or another about Roseanne Barr. Let her do what she does. It doesn't affect me. I'm not a fan. I don't care. However, there is another side of this for another female, quote-unquote, comedian, Samantha Bee. And it's amazing how her statement was much more personal, much more, to be honest, offensive, but got a very different reaction from the same entertainment industry that just bagged on Roseanne Barr.
President Trump says comedian Samantha Bee should be fired for the obscene and sexist comment on her TBS show directed at his daughter, Ivanka. In a speech last night receiving an award, Bee reportedly said, "There is power in saying what you feel without apology, and sometimes you also have to apologize." The president tweeted this morning, "Why aren't they firing no talent Samantha Bee for the horrible language used on her low-rating show? A total double standard." Vladimir Duthier of our streaming network CBSN has more reaction. Vlad, good morning.
Good morning. We should note that Bee's show is taped at a CBS studio here in New York. Now, the controversy has cost Bee at least two advertisers, Auto Trader and State Farm. The TBS host has said that segment crossed the line and apologized, but some conservatives argue the incident is further proof of a double standard in Hollywood.
Tearing children away from their parents is so evil.
The sexist comment that started the controversy came during an appeal to Ivanka Trump Wednesday night to end the administration's policy of separating some migrant children from their parents.
Let me just say, one mother to another, do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless. He listens to you.
Though the backlash didn't stop the comedian from accepting a Television Academy Award for her show, Full Frontal. No cameras were allowed inside the ceremony, but in her speech, Bee reportedly suggested the criticism was overblown, saying, in part, "We spent the day wrestling with the repercussions of one bad word, when we all should have spent the day incensed that as a nation, we are wrenching children from their parents." Earlier yesterday, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders called Bee's language vile and vicious. She added, "The collective silence by the left and its media allies is appalling." Emily Heil writes about media and politics for The Washington Post.
It's just an unprecedented level of engagement on these kinds of things that they perceive to be slights.
Sanders' forceful response to Bee contrasts with her reaction to Roseanne Barr's racist tweet, which she said was inappropriate. The comedian had likened a black Obama administration official to an ape.
Are you surprised that TBS has not taken any disciplinary action against Samantha Bee, whereas ABC immediately canceled Roseanne's hit show?
The remarks that Samantha Bee made, those were scripted. Those were part of a team effort. I think there's less of an ability for the network to completely distance itself from this.
TBS has apologized for Bee's comments and removed the uncensored clip online, but there are still no signs that it will be removing the show from the air. And guys, my social media feed has blown up with a case of whataboutism. Some people say, as the president has said, that there's a double standard. Others say Bee was talking about Trump's character. Roseanne Barr was talking about Valerie Jarrett's race, and that's different.
Yeah, but it's still vulgar. And I just think the vulgarness and the vileness is just so upsetting to me. I think if someone had said that about the Obama girls, the Bush girls, Chelsea Clinton, people would be marching in the streets. Yeah. I mean, at some point, we just have to take responsibility for the words that we use, comedian or not. And I like Samantha Bee and like her show, but I think that was I do think she crossed the line. And now we're setting up a tit-for-tat situation.
That's right.
I agree with you.
It's not
there has
okay.
to be a line.
There has to be a line.
But indeed, there is no line if you are progressive. Now let's remember that Samantha Bee's show has horrific ratings compared to what Roseanne was doing. And in truth, she's already lost a couple of advertisers as a result of what she has. But you'll notice she was able to go take on an award. Oh, we're going to give you an award. Really? I wonder if Roseanne Barr had gone to an award show after making that tweet, if that would have been sheltered by the left. So they didn't let the cameras in, if you're catching my drift. This is very simple. Roseanne Barr should not have been canceled. Oh, it's racist. Who cares? I really don't give a rat's behind. Let the market decide. If people want to see the show and it's making money, why take it off the air? If you're going to do that, why would you leave a show which has worse ratings and has at least 2 advertisers abandoning it because of it acting in poor taste? Well, and the idea that, the whole thing with Samantha Bee, it was a corporate effort, it was a group effort, then fire the whole group. You got rid of everybody associated with Roseanne on ABC. You can get rid of everybody associated with Full Frontal. Cut them all loose. You didn't have a problem when it was being said or tweeted. It wasn't even said. There was not a vulgar word mentioned. Planet of the Apes is not a vulgar term. It is a movie franchise. Muslim Brotherhood is not a vulgar term. Calling a woman a word that I will not use on air is both of those things. It's vile and it's vulgar. But Samantha Bee, even though she has very low market share, she has poor ratings, and she's losing advertisers, we need to ride it out with her because freedom of expression is important. But Roseanne Barr makes a tweet and her show's going gangbusters, and you yank her off the air? But there's no double standard? Do you really think I'm that stupid? Well, I'm not. And right now I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards, and after that we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
The most powerful man on earth cannot protect himself on social media? Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, we all know how vile and nasty leftist activists, professors, and students can be when they spew their politically charged and Saul Alinsky-inspired philosophical hatred toward those of us who like and appreciate this republic. They are no less vicious in their direct attacks against President Trump on social media. So rather than engage such foolishness, the president has blocked those who only attack him and his family with lowbrow name-calling. However, Judge Naomi Reese Buchwald of the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of New York has ruled that the president does not have the right to block vicious haters because he is the president of the United States of all the people, and that they can say whatever they want, and he has to take it. Well, apparently that judge isn't too bright. The First Amendment recognizes our right of free speech, but that does not mean others are forced to sit and take abusive language if they do not want to hear that. Hopefully the president will ignore that foolish judge and exercise his freedom to block away. I'm Ron Edwards.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, let's start Hour 2 with a little bit of controversy. We have had a major Black Lives Matter pushback in the form of a civil jury verdict. They have created not the $4 million man, not the $6.5 million Freddie Gray result in Baltimore, but in Florida they have created a that's right, $4 man. This is dealing with the shooting death in 2014 of Gregory Von Hill of Fort Pierce, Florida. This was reported on back in 2014 by the local affiliate in this particular manner.
We now know the name of the Fort Pierce man killed in a standoff with St. Lucie County Sheriff's deputies. News Channel 5's John Shaman is live in Fort Pierce right now, where the sheriff just wrapped up the news conference a short time ago. John?
Well, the sheriff expressing his condolences to the family of 30-year-old Gregory Hill Jr., the victim in this case. There was a lot of activity outside of Hill's home today on Avenue Q. Detectives still scouring the scene looking for additional evidence. Now, the confrontation that led up to this on Tuesday began after a call came in that there was loud and obscene music coming from Hill's home. Two deputies arrived who tried making contact with Hill. Now, when Hill manually opened his garage door, the detectives say that he had a gun and raised it at deputies as he tried to then shut the garage manually. The sheriff says that is when deputies fired.
Any homeowner can have a gun in their home. That is true. However, when law enforcement arrives at your home doing a lawful duty, and you're confronted with law enforcement and they give you an order to drop that gun, the last thing anyone should do is raise that gun.
Why would you come to a call that says loud music and it turns into a deadly, just a killing?
Didn't know if Hill was still alive inside. The sheriff said some of Hill's family told them that he was alive but scared to come out. A gun was found by Hill's body that was just inside the garage. Now, the sheriff did tell us the two deputies who were involved in the shooting, Christopher Newman, who had just joined the sheriff's office last October but had spent a decade with the Fort Pierce Police Department. He has no disciplinary actions prior. And the other deputy involved, Edward Lopez, who served in several capacities in the sheriff's office since 2004. He has one minor reprimand in his file. Both men on administrative leave tonight. An autopsy scheduled on Hill's body tomorrow. The sheriff would not say who may have fired the deadly shots or how many times Hill was hit. We're live in St. Lucie County. John Shaman, WPTV, News Channel 5.
Turns out that it was Deputy Newman who fired, and he is the guy with a 10-year law enforcement career and having had no complaints filed against him in 10 years. That's who did the shooting. This is interesting. In a lot of ways, you heard the woman saying, how does this turn into a shooting? That turned out to be the victim's or the dead man's cousin asking the question. And even then, it was being answered in the news report. They came to investigate a noise complaint. They get the man to open his garage door. He's opening it manually. And they see a gun. Turns out there was a gun. They see a gun as he gets the garage door partially open. They see a gun, and then the guy seeks to close the garage door manually, and at that point, Deputy Newman fired. Turns out he fired 3 times, killing Gregory Hill. There were no indictments. See, this is where this gets interesting. There was no indictment. Just like in the case up in Baltimore, though there were indictments, that was an indictment without going to a grand jury. They just made charges. They didn't indict anybody. So there was no indictment in Florida. There's just like there was no indictment in Baltimore. But those Baltimore cases, of course, went to trial, and every one of them was an acquittal. There were so many acquittals that after the first 3, that the state's attorney, Ms. Mosby, decided that she was not going to bring the other 3 cases forward because she was getting pimp slapped in court. Well, in Florida, they did not bring anything, and lacking a finding that anyone had acted inappropriately in law enforcement, the good people of St. Lucie decided, you know what? If the cops didn't do wrong, why should you get any money? What happened? Well, there was this report that was filed the 1st of this month.
$4. That's the amount a civil jury decided to award a Fort Pierce family after a man was shot and killed by a St. Lucie County deputy.
Only on 5 tonight, the man's fiance is speaking to our Megan McRoberts in a case now gaining national attention.
Well, that $4 was awarded to the family for funeral expenses and for pain and suffering after family members sued the sheriff's office for the deadly shooting. Now family members are calling that settlement a slap in the face. A banner still hangs on this Fort Pierce home with Greg Hill Jr.'s picture. It's where he lost his life in 2014.
Every police car in this county there.
Hill's fiancée, Terica Davis, remembers learning a deputy opened fire, killing Hill. It all stemmed from a noise complaint from a mom across the street. Investigators said Deputy Christopher Newman told them he shot at Hill multiple times after seeing a gun when Hill partially opened, then closed his garage door. Newman fired through that door, killing Hill.
I just knew my world was over.
An attorney representing Hill's family said evidence suggested the unloaded gun never left Hill's back pocket. Still, a jury decided the deputy's actions were justified.
I don't believe he tend to be any threat towards those officers, because this is a guy that's getting married in 2 months. This is a guy that knows his daughter is across the street at the school.
Deputies said Hill was heavily intoxicated. Hill's family sued the sheriff's office for wrongful death and excessive force, among other complaints. But after listening to dozens of witnesses, a jury awarded the family $4. The jury said Hill, a father of 3, was 99% responsible for his own death.
Slap in the face. How can you value someone's life off $4? How can you give $1 to each child for pain and suffering?
Sheriff Ken Mascara said in a statement, quote, Newman was placed in a very difficult situation, and like so many fellow law enforcement officers must do every day, he made the best decision he could for the safety of his partner, himself, and the public, given the circumstances he faced. And Hill's family members said that the funeral expenses exceeded $10,000. They will be appealing this ruling. Reporting in St. Lucie County, I'm Megan McRoberts, WPTV News Channel 5.
You got to understand something about the progressive mindset, particularly the black, or as I call it, Negro, KNEE-GROW mindset. They believe that if a police officer has to shoot anybody, then no matter what happens, somebody needs to pay the family. That's what they believe. This is part of the whole Black Lives Matter mindset. Is that, well, if we die, somebody has to pay. Well, let me get this straight. No one should have given a dime to Freddie Gray's family. Freddie Gray more than likely did himself in. That's not possible. There's no evidence that anything else occurred. None. No one should have given, if they did, a dime to Sandra Bland's family. She committed suicide. There is no evidence to the contrary. The idea that black people die doing things they shouldn't do and interacting with law enforcement does not, I repeat, does not create an obligation for taxpayers to reimburse the family of folks who don't know how to act. And what you are now seeing is the Make America Great Again mindset is putting that in action. They're no longer interested in this nonsense. Let me make this clear. They are saying, if you value your life, then you'll behave. But if you're not going to value your life, we're not your insurance policy to pay off your family. That's not who. You should have had life insurance then. It cost $10,000 to bury him. Apparently the man did not have insurance. That's a terrible thing. Well, it's terrible that he died. You are exactly correct. So why was he drunk as a skunk, playing music so loud to cause his neighbors to complain? It was both loud and obscene. This is a father of however many people, a father of 3, drunk, playing loud, obscene music, and had a gun on him, and apparently pointed that gun at police. And you think he's not going to get shot? Well, they shot him for no, they didn't shoot him for a noise complaint. They shot him because when he raised the garage door, he pointed a gun at him. And I'm sorry, if you point a gun at a law enforcement officer, expect them to shoot first and ask questions later. Particularly if you basically put a visual barrier between you and them and they don't know what you're doing with the gun. Come on here. But let's just be very clear about this. Black Lives Matter, you have met your pushback. If you think that this is not spread like wildfire through every civil trial lawyer in the country, you're mistaken. Only happened, I believe it was on Friday, and I guarantee you that every civil trial lawyer in the country is aware of this. I'm sure that Benjamin Crump is now rethinking his strategy when the police are involved, knowing that, guess what? A federal lawsuit is not likely to get you anything if there was no indictment of the police officer involved for wrongdoing. So this Michael Brown stuff, this Freddie Gray stuff, nope, not going to happen. At least not in Florida. And that was a federal trial. So now we have a federal precedent. Personally, I think it's a good thing that just because black people misbehave and die, everybody else, including other blacks, are not responsible for paying for it. And that families can no longer use their dead, misbehaving members as some type of a lottery ticket. This man died because he was drunk as a skunk with a gun pointing it at sheriff's deputies who came to check on him because somebody complained about the loud and vulgar music he was playing. They had a right to be there. They had a right to talk to him, and he was supposed to respond. He wasn't supposed to respond by pointing a gun at them. Now he's dead. And no, there's no award for that, nor should there be. Part of personal responsibility is absolving others of responsibility for what you do wrong. So, by the way, I haven't heard any notification that the lesbian founders of Black Lives Matter are going to respond to this. I haven't heard anything about that yet. There is a desire to appeal. I don't know how this is going to work because I know why the attorney's appealing, because he didn't get paid. Why the family is appealing? You want to get slapped in the face again? Okay. But note this, I'm going to say this one more time. Black Lives Matter. People are tired of this nonsense. And now you see just how tired they've become. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, talkamerica.radio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida, Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. We got a couple of interesting stories on the Colin half and half Kaepernick front. One is his lawyer running around screaming that he's got an NFL owner admitting that he was going to sign Kaepernick, but he changed his mind after he heard Trump's comments, and that proves collusion. Really? So if you're an NFL owner, once you decide something, you're not allowed to change your mind when you get other information at all. You have to stick to that if it benefits the lawyer's client. Really? Yeah, okay. That's a little bit weak as water. The other thing that's going on, which is, to be honest, even funnier, is a rumor that Sean King, also known as Talcum X, has decided to float that has everybody who believes the NFL is their personal social justice platform. They're just giddy with this. Some nameless NFL stars have told Talcum X that until Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid are on a roster, we're going to sit out we'll sit out the entire season if they're not signed. And you know what? We're going to go out and we're going to get 25% of the league to sit out with them. And that's going to force these guys to... Seriously? All right. NBC Sports has a segment on it that's called Pro Football Talk PFT. This is how they responded to the report from Sean King.
A report emerged over the weekend from Sean King, previously the New York Daily News, that some unnamed star players are considering sitting out the season until Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid have jobs. And one of the points we made last week after the anthem policy changed, no reason to continue to shun these guys because they can no longer take a knee during the national anthem. They know what's up if they sign a contract. But this report, far-fetched from my perspective. Now, I'm not suggesting that it was falsified. Plenty of others have already done that. It's possible that there are some star players who are considering it. I've considered a lot of things that I've never actually done. And I think as these star players consider the consequences of staying away during the regular season, the training camp fines, giving up game checks, paying back signing bonus, they're going to realize that's not the play. And, Chris, I've been saying this for a week now. If any players are upset about what happened last week, there's an easy way to take a stand now, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper. It's called don't show up for voluntary off-season workouts.
That is it. You're right about that, because everything else is just going to hurt the football players. And, hey, listen, again, I'm not saying Sean King, he's probably talked to players and star players who have said that to him, and that they're tossing around that type of idea in their brain. But I think when all said and done, yes, you're not going to see star players sit out the NFL season just on the behalf of Eric Reid and Colin Kaepernick and everything that it stands for. It's a great thought. I understand it. But, man, your career's over once you go down that tunnel. You're right. So right now you can make a true play here to really not hurt yourself, sit out OTAs, frustrate the organization, frustrate owners so they can sit there and go, man, our team isn't getting better. Our star players aren't here. Our leadership isn't here. Our biggest difference makers aren't here. And that can hit home in the NFL.
And if this report wasn't falsified and just made up, and because, look, when you have unnamed sources, and that is a power, and if you're not accountable to anybody because you're not affiliated with an organization, you can do a lot of things.
That's right.
By hiding behind an unnamed source. But I could see that maybe he planted the idea. Well, would you guys consider doing something like this? And we're like, oh, yeah, we'd consider that. Yeah, well, consider is such a broad word. You can consider a lot of things.
Yes.
I'm considering space flight. Well, I'll never do it, but I've considered it. I mean, there's a lot.
Let's send you out of here. Whew. Get you out of here, right into space. But I hear you.
Are you considering boycotting the season?
No,
I would.
I'm not.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All
no,
right.
I'm going to be here with you.
And here's the other thing, too.
Right.
Here's the other thing, too. If the star players don't play and they'd like to get 25% of the league to go with them, you backfill those spots with there's plenty of guys that want to play, and then others will become the stars. And when a player's injured, we see this all the time. It's out of sight, out of mind. Look at David Johnson.
Go on. Peyton Manning retired. Everybody kept watching football. You're right. The star players don't make it or break it.
More PFT Live right after this.
Let's break some of this down because they actually gave it up at the end. And in case you haven't noticed, sports pundits and sports media and reporters are about as left of center as you can get. But even they have to acknowledge at the end of the day, star players, y'all ain't the end all and be all. Y'all just ain't. It ain't like that. Y'all ain't that big a deal. Next man up. The New England team motto is actually still a league motto. But let's get this straight. Like he said, Peyton Manning's gone. People are still watching football. Brett Favre's retired. People are still watching football. Barry Sanders is gone. People are still watching football. Gale Sayers has been gone. People are still watching football. Players are just a revolving door. It's the game, which social justice and progressivism is doing its best to destroy, by the way. But let's get back to this idiocy from Talcum X. He's going to float this rumor. I got some NFL stars who are talking to me. Who are they? I can't tell you. Okay. You can't tell me. Got it. They say that they're going to sit out the season. They're not going to play until Colin Half and Half and Eric Reed are on a roster. They're just not going to do it. They're going to stand with Colin. Colin hadn't played in 2 years, by the way. Y'all going to. That's what you want me to believe. And you want me to believe they're going to do this in a league that has no guaranteed contracts. If you don't play, you don't get paid. There are no guaranteed contracts in the NFL. There's guaranteed money, but the contracts are not guaranteed. You want me to believe that folks are going to do this in a league where you're fined, in some cases up to $40,000 a day, if you don't show up at training camp. And you heard the man talk about all the money that's involved. Signing bonuses, performance bonuses, roster bonuses, all these other things, where they don't have the power because it's not their money, it's the owner's money that for which they're performing. And if they don't perform, and perform covers more things than being on the field, they don't get paid. You think they're going to give up all that money for Colin Kaepernick? So that Colin Kaepernick, who hadn't played in 2 years, Colin Kaepernick, who became a vegetarian and has lost some significant muscle mass, you believe that? Seriously? They're going to give it up for him? You sound like Job's wife. That's crazy. So, I don't have a guaranteed contract. And if I don't come to camp, I can get fined. And even if I do come to camp, they may have drafted somebody or traded for somebody who's so good that I might lose my job at camp anyway. So with all that going on, you think I'm going to... This is the thing. Here's what you're asking me to believe. That these social justice geniuses, and these are folks who have spent a decade or more just playing basically for free so that they can have a career that averages 3 to 5 years. The NFLPA says it's going to be 3.3 years. And there's also information out there that indicates that nearly 80% of all NFL players within 2 years of their last service in the league, they're bankrupt. So this is what you want me to believe. You want me to believe, because 25% of the league ain't stars. 25% of the league doesn't have these long tenures. 25% of the league, you start getting into that average 3 to 5 years. You want me to say out of my 3 to 5 year career, where after I spent 10 years playing this game basically for free, and this is my time to cash in so I can take care of me and mama and them and everybody else and fund my business and make sure that I'm set for life. You want me to give one of those 3 or one of those 5 years away for some dude who hasn't played in the league for 2 years, and I don't know if he can. That's what you're trying to convince people of. You sound stupid. What needs to happen, and what will happen, is everybody who wants to get paid to play football will be exactly where they're supposed to be when it's time for the checks to come. And the only ones who get paid are the ones that the teams want. Well, they got a collusion case. They don't have a collusion case. They may try. What he said is, well, somebody said that he would sign Kaepernick, and then he changed his mind. Some other folks said they were thinking about it, and then Trump started talking, and he changed his mind. You don't get it. The owners aren't signing or avoiding people because of Donald Trump. They're doing it because of what Donald Trump represents, which is the sentiment of quite a few of the people that make up their fan base. When Donald Trump said, fire the SOBs, he wasn't leading the way. He was just channeling some pent-up frustration among the American people. And I think the owners are smart enough businessmen to understand, particularly when they've seen the revenues declining. Now we're not going to poke that bear anymore, and that bear is the fan base. So I hear all this nonsense. I do. But first of all, consider the source. Anytime you get anything from Sean King, you already know he's lying. The question is, what about? How big a lie is it, and what is the lie about? Because that's what Sean King does. He lies. He's still lying about not being white. Both of his parents are white, and he still won't come clean. Trying to say he's the blackest dude that really? Come on, man. So this is what's going on to try to keep the NFL alive as a social justice platform. The problem is the money, and the way the money is distributed is working hard against that. And unless you have people who are independently wealthy and play football for the heck of it, and if you see what happens to people who play that game, nobody plays it professionally for the heck of it. If you got enough money not to play, you don't play. But for those of you who believe that somebody's going to take it on the chin and give up millions of dollars so Colin Kaepernick might get on a roster, and then they lose their spot on the team and maybe their chance to play again in the league because they miss a whole year, I'm sorry. That's just stupid. That's not being down with anything. That's not being united for a cause. That's just being dumb. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1, FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, this has been going on for a while here, but it's just not focused on. White progressives continue to slap blacks around and to replace them with immigrants, including illegal immigrants. And one of the ways that they are trying to make sure that they cement the leapfrogging of illegal immigrants over blacks is in education. Take a listen to what happened not earlier this month, last month in the month of May in the state of New Jersey.
There was an air of celebration as Governor Murphy prepared to sign a bill granting financial aid at state colleges and universities to unauthorized immigrants. 4.5 years ago, then Governor Christie signed a bill allowing the unauthorized to attend public college at in-state tuition rates, but Christie only went halfway. He vetoed a piece of the bill that would have made those students also eligible for tuition assistance grants, known as TAG grants. Today, Murphy finished the job.
Because of what we're doing in a few minutes here today, I hope both of you and all of your peers know that New Jersey stands by you and will continue to do so to help you live your dreams here in your home state.
His comments were addressed to two students who spoke before him. Esther Chang was born in South Korea, raised in Highland Park from age 6, and is a student athlete and leader.
Our federal government continues to launch unprecedented attacks on immigrant young people like me and CLO. We cannot be silent as ICE targets immigrants, including dreamers like me.
Maria Cielo Mendez, born in Mexico, raised from age 3 in Plainfield, is a high school senior accepted at 6 local colleges, but lacking money for tuition.
Because dreamers like me are barred from federal and state financial aid, even though I have always been at the top of my class, college has always felt out of reach. Today, that changes.
The signing was held at Rutgers Newark, which Murphy called the most diverse campus in America. Supporters packed the room as he signed the bill.
Chancellor Nancy Cantor, God bless you and thank you for your leadership and everything.
Senator Teresa Ruiz has been working on immigrant issues for 10 years.
We invest in these children in the K through 12 system, and when they graduate, many at the top of their class, we turn our backs on them and pretend that they don't exist.
With the signing, New Jersey becomes the 9th state to offer financial aid to the unauthorized. Assemblyman Gary Scher says that's 600-plus students who will be added to the TAG program's 66,000.
The total cost to the state of New Jersey for these dreamers as part of the TAG program, about $5 million. Ladies and gentlemen, for each taxpayer in this state, that will cost 17 cents.
A foreign-born student asked how Murphy will protect him from Trump administration policies.
We will do literally everything within my personal and our administration's power to have your back, period, full stop. We will not let you down. With that, let's go sign this baby.
This was another feel-good event for Murphy. If there's friction in his world, you don't see it at his public events. In Newark, I'm Michael Aaron, NJTV News.
So that's a feel-good story if you're not black. It's also a feel-good story if you're not a taxpayer. New Jersey is broke. New Jersey is so broke that they have decided that they're looking to tax online room booking, ride-sharing, marijuana, e-cigarettes, and the internet because they now have a record budget of $37.4 billion. And they're going to spend more on schools, pensions. I don't know why you would spend more money on pensions, excuse me, but mass transit. Why are you spending more money on mass transit? I don't even understand that for the state of New Jersey. You know why? Because for the last 6 years running consecutively, there have been people moving out of New Jersey at a higher rate than those moving into New Jersey. So you have fewer people in the state of New Jersey. I don't know why you need more mass transit if you have a smaller population. And the people who are moving out are the people who would pay taxes. But you're raising your budget. But you're using your money to leapfrog illegal immigrants over native-born children and potential students who could use the help. See, there used to, there was there's a saying with American Express: membership has its privileges, but if you're in a progressive state, citizenship does not have privileges. Privileges go to being undocumented. And this is part of the overall strategy that progressives have, particularly in the Democrat Party, because blacks generally vote Democrat, and guess what? That's where the progressives happen to be. They have already committed themselves to replacing the black voter with the Latino voter. One way to do that is to educate him and make sure that they understand where the money came from. Progressives are looking out for you. We're going to protect you. We're going to give you money. Even if we don't have the money, we're going to make sure, because it's not about whether or not you're going to do well. It's about whether or not we have political power. We don't care if the state is broke as long as we have political power in the broke state. We'll figure out how to lie about the money, but we have to make sure that we stay in office. That is the mantra of progressives. And if you really think that this does not impact black people, Daily Signal ran an article recently, well, not that recent, February of last year. Illegal immigration harms black Americans, according to Civil Rights Commissioner. because black males are more likely to face or experience competition from illegal immigrants. That's for lower paying jobs. And now what you have is, now you're seeing in education where you're getting more competition. People are creating competitors with illegal immigrants, giving them access to what they did not have access to before. And guess what? They're going after that marginal place, which is probably occupied disproportionately by black applicants to colleges. Let me help you with something. There is a finite number of slots in the freshman classes at colleges every year. Adding more competitors does not add more slots. And if you're making it financially easier for those who you add to the competition, easier than for those who are already struggling in the competition, which would include a lot of black students, you're helping black students to fail because you have made a choice for whom you prefer. A U.S. Civil Rights Commission study in 2010 determined immigration had a disproportionate impact, negative impact, on black Americans, but the study didn't distinguish between illegal immigration, between legal and illegal immigration. Didn't make a difference. The findings came through various field hearings with experts. Are you hearing this yet? I mean, because sometimes you really want to make sure people actually hear you. A 2012 Census Bureau report found more than half of American-born blacks did not continue their education beyond high school. But you're spending money on illegal immigrants to give them free tuition. I thought that blacks believed that they had won something in the civil rights movement. But it seems now that progressives are taking those victories and giving them to someone else who wasn't even in the fight, who don't even have a right to the battle. Now, the NAACP, whom I consider the National Association of African Complaint Personnel, they're supposed to be the leading black civil rights group. They did not respond to the Daily Signal when they wanted to talk about this particular story. The organization has supported immigrant. Let me put that. The NAACP is anti-black. Immigration hurts blacks, and the NAACP supports immigration. They support immigration reform that would provide legal status to illegal immigrants who are then going to compete with blacks for jobs and education. And you haven't figured out what's going on yet? White progressives are pimp slapping you, and they have some of these people that you think are down with the struggle and really invested. They are selling you. They're selling you out. Black people should be the first in line to stare down the federal government and say, if they don't belong here according to our laws, get them out or get them behind me. I belong here. Whatever is good in this country, I should have first crack at before somebody who does not have a legal right to be here. That's not that's not lacking compassion. That's going back to the idea that citizenship, just like membership, is supposed to have its privileges. Nobody should be telling blacks that they do not have education rights. Not when you're telling illegal immigrants that they do. I would that we get rid of all types of grants and loans and everything else. And I would definitely go back to saying, if you don't have a right to be in this country, you definitely don't have a right to a slot in any of our colleges and universities until after every person who would get in with your credentials, and maybe a few more who don't have your credentials but happen to be legal citizens and legal residents, until they are served, we're not even talking about serving you. That's called taking care of your own. We don't do that in this country the way we're supposed to. We don't do that in America. We don't do that. Definitely don't do that in the Democrat Party, because the Democrat Party decided to replace black people with Latinos. And this is one way in which it's done, and the NAACP is fighting for the wrong team, helping white progressives pimp slap blacks over higher education. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. WLBB, News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. Are the Negroes, KNEE-GROWS, finally waking up? Because, see, the real black folks never went to sleep. But we've had going on 6 decades, more than 5 decades at least, of negrosity, where people come up with interesting ideas about black folks, find a way to engraft them into the minds of black folks and keep endorsing them into them, to the point that blacks don't have anything that resembles a sense of community, or sometimes even a matter of common sense. For example, we have poll evidence that black people are a bit out of step, at least the ones who claim to be woke, out of step with the rest of the country. Because in 2013, we had a Rasmussen poll that made it very clear that blacks were the most racist people in the United States. More racist than whites, more racist than Asians, more racist than Hispanics or Latinos. But blacks will argue you down that you can't be racist if you're black because you don't have any power. Let me help you out with something. And this is from One American News Network back in February. White folks are on to that little weak rhetorical nonsense, and they have rejected it. They know you're racist. You don't believe me? Listen to this clip. It takes a couple of seconds to get into the thought, but it makes it real clear that that stuff has been exposed.
He doesn't consider him to be an aberration. Is he saying that this is normal for Democrats, that this is their philosophy on race?
Apparently so, although that can't be all that surprising considering so many people in the Black Lives Matter movement have repeatedly derided white people as lesser than them, as evil people who need to be, in some cases, even eradicated from the face of the earth. And, the Democratic Party has been moving further left as they've gotten towards the 2020 presidential race. People within the movement have been denouncing people like House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi because they think that she's too centrist. And now the talking point is that black people actually can't be racist because they've suffered oppression and white people haven't. So they can't be racist against white people because they don't have institutional power. This is just a complete twisting of what the definition of racism is, so that people can make apologies for their fellow progressive people who consistently say racist things about white people. And not to mention that President Obama was seen in a photo with Louis Farrakhan, and yet the photo wasn't even brought to light because the media was afraid that the photo would sink his political career.
Not just the media. The Congressional Black Caucus actually reached out to the journalist, quote-unquote journalist as well, and asked him to hide it. The Congressional Black Caucus protected Barack Obama. So,
yeah, the Clown Brown Caucus in Washington, D.C. protected Obama, and Obama never really returned the favor. But the real thought from that is, guess what? Those were two white women, basically. They have figured out that blacks are racist. They're letting everyone know. Guess what? If they know, a whole lot of white folks are already aware of the fact that blacks are racist. The most progressive blacks honestly think that they are immune to being racist. Well, guess what? Nobody else believes you. White folks don't believe you. And in case you haven't noticed, you're outnumbered by whites 5-1 in this country. There are a number of things that go with the progressive mindset that have taken blacks down. Now blacks are the most homosexual group in the country. Blacks are the least married group in the country. Blacks have the most sexually transmitted diseases in the country. Blacks have the highest incidences of criminality and incarceration. All these things are the result of 5+ decades of having white progressives tell blacks what the heck is supposed to be important to them. Because you bought into the notion that equality, as white progressives define it, was the flippin' holy grail, and it's not. Fortunately, every so often, you have a moment like this from a May 30th meeting of Turning Point. Turning Point's the organization that, in this case, Candace Owens was in attendance, and they had an open mic situation, or they had a mic out in the audience, and you heard a young black man say this.
But I'm just saying, I've been researching Black Lives Matter, and I've been understanding the politics and how they're funded by white liberals. And recently, I've been feeling like they're white liberals in blackface, because they're white liberals in blackface. And when I say that, it's because the white liberals is all about feminism, LGBT. White liberals don't really care about black people. I realize white liberals don't really care about me, bro.
That's correct.
I'm off the plantation, bro. I'm off the plantation, bro. I escaped the plantation, bro. I'm empowered. They don't want me to have power. They want to keep me dependent. But I'm realizing this. They put white liberal ideas, LGBT, women, non-binary, white feminism, all that Hillary Clinton stuff, put it in blackface. Because if we say it, it's going to be too bad. So then Black Lives Matter, it started by 3 lesbian women. It's not really supporting black families. My question is, what do you think that has to say about the movement that they don't mention anything about black fathers on the website?
I'll tell you what it means.
Nothing about black fathers.
First off, if I can just say, woo, another one off the plantation. They got a problem. And this is how it starts, right? So this is how it starts. So what he said in the beginning was really interesting, is he said, originally, I liked Black Lives Matter. Me too. Why would I be opposed to that? Black Lives Matter, right? Of course they matter. So you have to understand about the left. They are incredibly good when it comes to linguistics. They use euphemisms, right? Planned Parenthood. Of course I want Parenthood to be planned. Oh, by the way, we're actually killing 800 black babies every single day. Eeks, you know? So this is what they do. They manipulate you by using a term that no person in their right mind would be against, right? Who would be against Planned Parenthood? Who would be against Black Lives Mattering? But the truth is, when you do a deep dive and you start to look at the finances, you're exactly right. People that are in control, Black Lives Matter is a political arm of the Democratic Party. Call them what they are. And their idea is to keep black people, as you just mentioned, enslaved and dependent via their emotion and their anger, right? So what I would say to you first off is to encourage you to keep going and to keep doing a deep dive, because that's how it started for me. Right? It was one thing that didn't make sense. It was this constant narrative being shoved down my throat. But when I deep dived on these organizations and looked at who was funding them, it never really lined up to the things that would make the black community better. You mentioned that that you realize that they don't promote straight black men, right? They never talk about the things that matter, black fathers in their home. That's because they don't want black fathers in the home. Make no mistake. So congratulations to you. Keep digging. And can somebody at Turning Point USA get his stuff so we can hire him?
That is, in shorthand, a great deal of what the problem is. Let me ask you this, or let me put this to you. Black Lives Matter, an organization founded by 3 lesbian women, how can that possibly effectively represent the black male? It can't. Let me put it to you. The successful civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s had strong black women in it, but it was not run by women. No community that ever succeeds and hangs together is ever run by women. White progressives have somehow convinced black people in this country that they can have a successful society in which their men are not at the forefront. And that is why you have the problem. The scariest thing imaginable for a white progressive is a heterosexual black man who wants and will strive to maintain a family. because they know exactly what that has meant throughout the history of this country. They know that the fact that there were heterosexual black men who withstood the rigors and the atrocities of slavery, that's part of what kept the black family together. That is it. He was there. No matter what they did to blacks, they managed to maintain a sense of family. That's what got you through the civil rights movement and got you through Jim Crow. Black males trying their best to provide for and hang on to their families. Are they flawed? Like everybody else. But now we don't have that anymore. We have women with a Y chromosome. If I see the Cleveland Cavaliers come out with their homeless woman attire, calling it a suit again, I don't know. But we're wrapping up the show right now. Understand this. When you wake up, black people, you're going to have to stop supporting progressivism. I don't care what party it's in. You're going to have to run the other way if it means you don't vote at all, because you can't tell me that voting has done you that much good over the last 5+ decades. That's going to be it for this go round. God bless you. God keep you. Remember those for whom you care. And always remember, particularly for black people, there is no such thing as a successful community that does not have men doing their best to lead it. Until next time, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.